how do you pivot to art direction? How do you become an art director if you're already down a different path, maybe a different design path that's a little, tangential, kind of closer to art direction, or maybe a little further from that. You're maybe a video creator, or what's wild is in the past 2 months, I've had probably like 6 to 8 different architects or designers with architecture backgrounds ask me how they could pivot to art direction, how they could become an art director. So if you've seen some of my videos recently, I've been kind of working on this roadmap here in FigJam, the art director roadmap, sort of trying to figure out the path that I took and many other art directors took in order to become an art director, so that ideally you can follow this and not have to spend a ton of money on expensive portfolio programs and portfolio school in order to build a portfolio, to get a job. Hopefully you can do this on your own. So I'm going to talk through two main things. And getting a job as an art director is not easy, but I don't think it needs to be so complicated that you can't do this on your own. And I do know that a lot of people do it on their own. That I know copywriters and art directors, they're now even creative directors that got into the ad industry on their own by making a portfolio in their spare time, sometimes completely from scratch. If you're pivoting from another career, though, you're in good luck because ad agencies love diverse backgrounds. So when I talk to people like these designers that have more of an architecture background, I'm thinking, man, well, that sounds awesome. You're probably a step ahead of some of the students that are just going straight into art direction because you have some professional experience and you may have some pieces, some work that you could pivot into art direction work. Maybe not, because an art director portfolio is going to be really different. But let me show you some of the things that you can do to maybe, make some of that work, those pieces, work in a portfolio. So those two main aspects, most creatives that want to become art directors are missing in two things. They don't know how to think conceptually in the way that advertising creatives need to think. And they don't have a portfolio. They don't have a portfolio that represents them as an art director. If you're going down the art director path, it's pretty similar. If you want to be a copywriter, or you want to be just but if you want to be a designer in advertising as well, but just you're showing different things. You're showing your writing or you're showing your design more than in art direction. You're showing your visual concepting skills. So you'll see in the description below, I've linked this FigJam. You can access this, and I'm not going to go through all the details in this. I've talked about it in a previous video, and I'll make another video in the future where I do go into all the details once I've kind of figured everything out. But look at this section, learn to think conceptually. This is one of the big pieces that a lot of creatives don't know how to do, and even a lot of creatives that do get into advertising, they struggle with, and that's thinking conceptually. This is the piece that really makes advertising creatives stand apart and makes the ad agency experience really valuable when you do want to get a job at some of these bigger brands that hire from ad agencies. Thinking conceptually all comes down to understanding insights and how to turn those insights into an idea, and then understanding big ideas, not just any ideas, but ideas that are literally big. They're big as in they can stretch across multiple touch points, different mediums, different channels. They're literally big. So first, insights. Let's just talk about it briefly and we'll dive deeper into it in the future. But an insight is a revelatory or unspoken truth. It's kind of like a sort of an epiphany. When you say it, it almost sounds wrong or like a contradiction. But when you think about it, it's like, that really is true. That's pretty powerful. A good insight really will make you think, I hadn't thought of it that way before. I've included some great resources here. The book, Hey Whipple Squeeze This, he goes into insights a bit. He really goes into advertising as a whole, as being a creative and coming up with concepts for advertising as a whole. He touches on insights too. And then my friend Mark Pollard, who runs Sweathead, you can also follow him at Sweathead and at Mark Pollard on Instagram. He has so many great posts and also does workshops on advertising strategy. And great creatives understand strategy. They don't always have to be the ones coming up with the strategy and finding those insights. But a lot of times when you get a brief from a strategist, maybe the strategist has found a really good insight and maybe they haven't. And that's totally fine. A strategist's job isn't always to just find like the best insight. Oftentimes the creatives need to find and dig deeper to find a powerful insight that could make your campaign or really spark some ideas and make that campaign stand out. So some key traits to a strong insight. I know it's really hard when you don't have an example to really go off of, but some key traits. It's rooted in human behavior. It taps into emotions, psychology, or cultural truths. It's not just a fact. A lot of times people will be like, oh, that's an observation. That's not an insight. And it's not black and white. One person's observation might be another person's insight. It's a spectrum. And so when you do hear that, whether you're working already as an advertising creative or you're a student, when you do hear that, just know that it is subjective. There's a spectrum. But oftentimes when you do, share an insight and they're like, oh, it's more of an observation, it's usually because it's obvious. It's like, oh, the sky is blue, or, people get hungry in the mornings, so they need their breakfast. That's not an insight. It's something that's a little bit deeper. And it's also tension driven. And these are all the traits I'm reading here. It's tension driven. So it'll highlight some sort of gap, a struggle, or a contradiction. And that's why I feel like they often feel like epiphanies. Insights will feel sort of uncomfortable or like a contradiction. Like, wait, how is that true? But when you hear it again, or you read it again, it's like, that really is true. And that's why the label or the definition also has, it's a revelatory truth, or it's an unspoken truth. It's something that's really not that obvious yet. And then the last thing, it's got to be actionable. It's got to be something that we can actually tie to the brand. The brand could maybe say something about, or you could come up with ideas on how this insight could be articulated through some creative advertising in an interesting way, either through interesting visuals, through interesting language, or both for the most part. So like I said, Mark's got some great resources on just like some great examples also. So check out his Instagram posts for some examples on reading a good insight. I love this post, how to turn observations into insights. Insights are unspoken human truths. So here's an example, and this isn't a brand. He's actually talking about Santo Domingo, the city. And someone might have an observation. There's not much to see in Santo Domingo. I think he came up with this insight when he was actually visiting the city. And one of his techniques of making observations feel more like an insight is just write it in a more savage way. You don't need to see Santo Domingo. That's an insight where you're all of a sudden like, is that a truth? That sounds like a contradiction. And he goes further. Santo Domingo is full of noise, sound, and music. Locals say it's one of the noisiest places in the Caribbean. Or Caribbean. I think locals would probably pronounce it more Caribbean. I don't know. So that's where we're starting to feel this tension. It's like most people would think, oh, it's such a noisy city. It's not worth visiting. And that's where we might find some interesting places to spark creative ideas. I can already start to think of how we come up with a campaign that is all about the sound, that is almost trying to make tourists not want to come to the city because this is a city that's too noisy for people who can't handle it, or something like that. Almost making it feel maybe exclusive, like you have to be not just a tourist, but you need to be someone of a different caliber in order to visit this city. Now, I don't know anything about Santo Domingo, so I have no idea how offensive Mark is being with this insight, but I think it's really interesting how he just wrote it in a more savage way, and that starts to become more interesting and turns that observation into a great insight. Again, it's a spectrum from observations to insights. It's about digging deeper into something that isn't being spoken, but when you hear it, it's like, that is really interesting. That is actually true. So here it is. There's a lot to listen to in Santo Domingo. That might be another observation. And then he writes it more savagely here. Santo Domingo is for your ears, not your eyes. Again, great example. That's starting to get my creative wheels turning. And that isn't the idea. Again, the insight isn't the idea, because the insight might not be articulated in a way that is customer facing or is something that can be campaignable. So you're going to have to be creative in how you articulate that. And then also when you come up with the idea, you need to have a clear point of view or almost a clear formula of like, this is what we're going to do. If Santo Domingo is for your ears, not your eyes, then we are going to do blank. We're going to do this commercial to celebrate blah, blah, blah. We're going to do this stunt. We're going to sponsor this group of whatever. That's where you start to get into the idea. Santo Domingo isn't a city to see, it's a city to hear. Let's check out his other one. Again, insights are unspoken human truths. They help us see ourselves and the world around us in new ways. I love this. Facts are cool. And again, it's kind of like on observation. We're not looking for just facts. We're looking for startling facts. Those are the coolest insights. Those are the things that are going to make you, spark an idea. So I have a couple examples down here, and I want to continue to add to this roadmap because right now, not everything is perfect, and some of these examples aren't great. These are great campaigns, but I still need to work on making sure that I am articulating everything the way I want to. But one of the most famous campaign examples of just being such a strong insight is the old Snickers. I don't know if they're still doing it. I'm sure it's still a platform that they're making campaigns on. But Snickers has the idea, you're not you when you're hungry. And where that really came from was you could have the observation that people get irritable when they're hungry. That's obvious. But then the insight here is hunger makes you act like someone else. And then, you could tie it to the brand. A quick snack can bring you back to normal. But that insight of like you becoming hangry means your personality changes and you aren't you is where the idea and the articulation of you're not you and you're hungry really comes from, is from that insight of hunger making you change your personality. So then that campaign is Snickers isn't just a snack. It's a hunger fixing personality reset. That's them. And this isn't customer facing. This might be a statement internally to just talk about what is this idea actually doing, some sort of formula. And so this concept is we're thinking about Snickers, not just a snack. It's a hunger fixing personality reset. Once you get it, personality resets. And so kind of figuring out what that formula is or the framework of your idea is when you can make sure it's really clear and other people can execute across multiple platforms, channels, or mediums as well. And I like to use the word articulation. I would probably say campaign articulation. Yeah, this is also the platform idea articulation. I use the word articulate because an idea, you don't have to always have the line or the tagline or headline right off the bat. This is still an idea. Snickers is a hunger-fixing personality reset. But then once you do get that line, oftentimes you're going to just represent the big idea over all of these campaigns by just saying you're not you when you're hungry. So when people talk about great ideas, they'll be like, oh, you're not you when you're hungry. That's a great idea. It's like, it is. It's the name of a great idea. The idea was that they're turning Snickers into a personality reset. Here's some other examples in here, but I want to move on and let's talk about the next big step in becoming an art director if you're pivoting from another career. And this is the same if you're starting from scratch, you're going to next need to start putting together a portfolio. And how do you put together a portfolio if you've never, if you don't have actual job experience, if you've never worked in an ad agency or you're not working for these actual brands? You just make spec campaigns. Spec campaigns basically means you make fake work, you make examples, you mock it up as if it was real life. And I've got some resources in here of places you can find inspiration, some student award shows that, you could enter some of these student award shows and they often provide briefs that you could work towards as they'll provide a challenge or a problem for you to try to solve in a creative way. And then you submit some sort of project or a case study or video in order to answer it. If you get awards, that can often be for a student a great way of showing the world, showing potential employers that you make work that people think is good. It can be a shorthand for them knowing that this person has made good work and they understand conceptual thinking. Because these are very specifically like ad agency, advertising specific type award shows. Some aspects of it can be more design focused and more craft focused. So the One Show Archive, for example, it's also a great place to just see references and examples of the kind of work you can make when you're not actually working for these brands. Do a Wing Woman, for example, is this great idea. And I looked at it earlier, so I'll just explain it to you. It's got this great insight that women, when they travel, often feel unsafe because there's a language barrier. And so, creepy men and people on the other side of that language barrier might talk about you or, say things behind your back. And that's, at a surface level might not be problematic. Well, it's problematic, but it might not be dangerous, but it can get dangerous when you don't hear those red flags or you don't understand what other people are saying. So this Duo Wingwoman idea is for Duolingo, where the app has this option of being always on, always listening. And obviously it can understand all these different languages. And if it hears red flags, maybe men saying some weird things behind your back or, something that you need to watch out for, it'll alert you and maybe translate it for you. So you know what's going on around you. It's your, not your wingman, it's your wingwoman. So it's got this really great insight that's really interesting and builds a fun idea on top of that. This isn't real though. It's for Duolingo, but it's fake. And that's okay. Duolingo, no brand is ever gonna care. They're not going to be mad that you made free advertising for them as a student. I added this example into my rubric here of different examples for a portfolio. Anyways, so spec work. You can do fake work. You can also include passion projects. Passion projects aren't branded at all. They show your craft, your thinking, things you care about, maybe your diverse background, and you can still put that in your book and you can still put that in your portfolio. And that's where I really think creatives from other backgrounds, maybe you don't have a creative job, but you're a creative and you've done projects, or maybe you've got some architecture projects. You can still find ways to work it into your portfolio and include it. And it might not be the top or main piece, but it can still fill it out if it's really interesting and is something that a creative director would be impressed by. Some things I would think about there is just try to give it a story, try to give it an idea of some sorts. It depends on the project, and without actually seeing, maybe you've got this, I'm just keep thinking of all these architects that have reached out saying, I want to be an art director. If you've designed some sort of amazing room, show the thought that goes into that, show the craft that goes into that. If you are still working on things, push it as far as you can, push it further than you'd expect. And the fact that you did it for real is a leg up on a lot of students that are doing things for fake. I also have included other examples here, some other schools you need to check out because those are your competition. Whether you're 30 years old and you're just now pivoting into art direction, or you're 22 and you're working on your portfolio, these are your competition. They're students that are learning how to think conceptually day in and day out and are working on their portfolio every day in school. They've got the time. So I know that's daunting, but take it as a resource for you to see, what can you get inspired by from these other students. And then the new thing that I've added to the bottom here is an example rubric of sorts, of a checklist of different projects that you could add into your portfolio. And this will kind of highlight the missing pieces for you. So taking these designer architects, for example, you probably don't have a 360 ad campaign, or you might not have a social media focused piece, or, different things like that. This rubric will kind of outline how many I think you should do. And the total really is only 4 to 6 projects. So let's say you already have a design project that you've done, and it might not be as advertising-y or as conceptual in the advertising sense. It's not like rooted in these human insights or is like almost purpose or cause-based, but it can still fit into your portfolio in a different way. It just has a different purpose. It proves a different thing about you. And 4 to 6 is not that many. I started my portfolio with only having, I think, 4 pieces. I think by the end, I had 6 pieces. By the time I graduated, I had 6 pieces. But every single piece, I was trying to prove a different thing, that I could be an art director. And I really came into art direction from more of a content creator background, more as a video creator. So at the end, I really had to figure out ways of proving my design skills and proving my craft because I didn't take design classes. So let's go through this rubric. I would recommend 1 to 2 360 campaign projects. And a 360 campaign just means you've got a big idea that stretches across multiple touch points and you show those touch points. You mock it up. So it's got to be conceptual. It's got to be strategic. Try to articulate what that insight is and how you're coming up with a strong idea that is rooted in that insight. And then you're showing that your idea has legs by mocking it up across maybe a social, out of home TV, some sort of in real life thing, maybe a guerrilla stunt, an activation that could be like a pop-up or, something totally different, something non-traditional. Maybe you make an app. Advertising can be anything. You can still do print. You can show your craft through print or something, completely unthought of. 4 to 10 touch points. 3 is okay, but ideally it's at least 4 different touch points, because the point is you're showing your idea has the legs, has the breadth to stretch across all these different ideas, and you understand how to do that. Someone's here. These next pieces, this one isn't optional, but it could overlap with the 360 campaign. The purpose here is to show your craft, show your design, and really one of your pieces, it doesn't have to stretch across, 4 to 10 different touch points, but if you've got one piece that you just obsessed over, you just went all in, you showed how you can animate like crazy, you showed your typography skills, you didn't just make a font, you made like a full-blown system that stretched across, blah, 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 blah. You need to go all in, show the craft, show the process. The purpose of this one is really to make sure they don't see any weakness in your craft. And that can overlap with the 360 campaign, but probably not. I've got a great example of this. My friend Braden Clark, when we were in school, he still has this in his portfolio because it was just so awesome. He created these print ads. And he is an illustrator, and he wanted to make sure, despite the fact that ad campaigns don't always use his illustration skills, he wanted to show just how cracked of an illustrator he is, and drew all of these by hand. This is before AI, before a lot of things. I think he used his iPad, so everything's by hand, and just drew all these details, showed his finesse, his skills, and how great of an illustrator and designer he is. There's a fun idea behind it, but for the most part, you're just looking at it. It's just eye candy. It also, for the copywriter he was working with, showcased her copywriting skills in these like alliterative, like really long alliterative sentences. But I just love this campaign, and I'm always showing people like, you need to be good. You need to really go all in and really pour your heart into these pieces. And I just remember all the time that Braden was putting into these, and they're just so impressive. So the rest of these, except for passion projects, there's some optional ones. You might want to do an experimental project, something non-traditional. Maybe that's an app. Maybe that's, something a little different. That Duo Wing Woman idea, I would think, is a little bit experimental. It's non-traditional, and that's okay. Advertising doesn't have to be all about what's on a billboard. Anything that can make a splash, and, I could hear the headlines and hear the content creators making videos about that Duo Wing Woman app, if that ever was real. So I have some examples in there if you ever want to look at that. Social or content focused, ideally, like any of your 360 campaigns would show how it comes to life in social, whether that's social paid ads or some sort of organic series or, something totally different. This is where you need to show that you are native to the internet. You understand how reels, memes, carousels, trends, all that works. Show that you're a master of the hook. The hook is not something a lot of traditional advertising creatives really do very well. I think it's a lost art in advertising, and hopefully a lot of the creatives with more of the social and content creator backgrounds, they're going to be pushing more of the skill of mastering the hook into advertising. So this is optional. Maybe you've got some stuff that already shows social, but I think that's a good example. Passion projects we already talked about, but those are not optional. You need to show at least 1 or 2 passion projects. And if you've got a diverse background of different, a different profession, maybe you're showcasing a little bit of that. But this is where you're showing your creative energy and your personal style in a different way. I remember a really good example of a girl I mentored. Her portfolio, she loved to make clothes. She designed clothes and then not just made them in a factory or whatever, but she literally hand dyed these clothes. I think even like with blueberries. We made dyes with berries. So hand dyed them from scratch as scratch can be, and then put that in her portfolio as a project. And you still need to like, build it out as a bit of a story, show the process, how you came up with this idea, different things. I've talked about Taylor Dahl, or I had actually Taylor Dahl on the podcast previously, a friend of mine who's an art director and has a great example in his book still. And book, it just means portfolio, but he has got a great portfolio piece that he did where he took pictures in Europe following, I'm not doing a great example explaining it, but following his grandpa's trip through Europe, and took the exact same pictures in the exact same spot. And I think his grandpa had passed away at the time, so it was a really like meaningful passion project for him. Check out that video if you want to hear more about that and you want to hear more about passion projects. And then the last thing, again, this is optional. This was a piece that really helped me get a job, was do something ideally for real, but do something that shows you can get a response from people. Maybe it's cause-based, sort of like the Duolingo Woman idea. Maybe it's cause-based. Maybe it has some sort of, feel-good aspect to it. But maybe it's also just something that you do for real online that you get a lot of response from people. Maybe it's a stunt you do in real life. And that's what I did. Me and some friends, one of our projects was this idea that we had about Venmoing the homeless, the fact that cash was becoming more rare and we're becoming more of a cashless society. So how do you give money to the homeless? And so we came up with this fun idea of basically launching this local homeless shelter's Venmo account. And what we did was we just lined up down Main Street in our city with a whole bunch of cardboard signs. And as cars went by, they could read a message that was connected between all those cardboard signs. We did that for real. We did for a couple hours, or an hour, I think it took. And we filmed it. So people that drove by saw those signs and saw, the message. And then they went and Venmoed the homeless, Venmoed this new Venmo account for it was the Food and Care Coalition. But the big thing was we filmed it and then we put it on social media, and that spread around. It spread on Facebook, which was the bigger thing at the time, and we raised $6,000 for that homeless shelter, the Food and Care Coalition. I don't know why I'm not just showing you. You can't find this online, I don't think, unless you type in this exact URL up here. Anyways, it's a long video. There's a lot I would do differently now that I'm not a student. But again, this is optional. You only need 4 to 6 pieces in your portfolio. And at the end of the day, make work that you want to make. Make projects and put projects in your portfolio that you want to make more of. And that's the mentality you need to have. Your future boss, your future employer, ad agency, or brand you work with is not going to be the source of all of the fulfilling projects you're going to be able to do in your life. You need to start, even before getting a job at those places, start making work that you want to make. And when you make work that you want to make, even as fake or spec work, or making things that are not branded, see these 360 campaigns, they're going to be branded, so they're going to probably be spec. But the passion project can be just legit things that you're doing. Not at all of that to say is you need to start making these projects now. And that's how you're going to get a job. It's not the other way around. The job isn't going to always supply you with great projects. And that's been the case for me throughout my career. I've worked in some great places, and I haven't always made work that I've loved. I rely on my hobbies and content and different things like that to make projects that keep me fulfilled. And that's how I get better opportunities, is the side things that I do. So 4 to 6 projects, no weak projects. If you're even wondering, if you're doubting a specific project and you think it's not good enough, make it better. It needs to be good. It's better to have 4 good projects than 6 okay projects, or even having 4 great projects and then 2 really bad ones. As soon as they see the bad ones, they're gonna think, oh well, what if they deliver at that quality for me? So get rid of anything that's bad. It can be all spec, it can be made up, self-initiated. What matters is each project shows a single strong idea and shows your craft. Again, you can find the link to this Fig Jam. There's a lot more in here, and you can dive deeper, and in the future we'll add a lot more. You can find it in the description of the video, or I'll pin the comment right at the top. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm probably going to be doing a lot more videos like this as I add resources. So stay tuned for some more chats about how to become an art director.